You're listening to today's inspirational message on the Proverbs with Kurt Bjorklund.
Proverbs 13 has been a chapter that we have said is a chapter that presents an underlying issue that may keep us from the desires of our heart. And we talked about how being too proud to heed instruction or to surround ourselves with wise people, being too proud to push or to dive into the questions we have about what people are doing. And today we come to verse 10. And here's what it says. In the ESV, it says, "By insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom." So at first, this appears just to be another proverb saying, take advice, take wisdom. The NIV says, where there is strife, there's pride. The New Living Translation says, pride leads to arguments. And the Zondervan Study Bible says, the colossal ego that cannot accept advice and responds with bickering and disagreements is how that basically points to that. And so what I think is happening here is it's pointing out that whenever there is a continual sense of unrest, bickering, disagreement, that the underlying issue is pride. Now, good teams, sports teams, work teams, bands, whatever, often have healthy disagreements. But when there's strife and insolence, usually it's rooted in an unhealthy ego. And I've seen teams that were dysfunctional, and I did not know until one person was removed and everything changed for the better that the problem was an underlying kind of pride. And I've often tried to work to reform and help a person who maybe feels like they had some pride issues with little to show for the amount of effort that went into it. And what I think this is pointing to is sometimes the only good course of action is to change the players on the team. A better situation, more coaching, more structure, more accountability doesn't always change a person whose ego is in the way. And when no matter what you do, it seems like there's strife, there's quarreling, then somebody has to go. Now, to be fair, we need to ask ourselves a question, and that is not just is it somebody else, but is it us who have the ego problem? Because if it's true that when a conflict arises, that it's easy to assume that the other person is wrong, that Proverbs tells us that the problem is pride, and that means that either the other person's prideful, we're prideful, or both are prideful. And strife is really more than just a difference of opinion. It's a clash of competing and unyielding personalities, according to Derek Kidner. So whenever there's a conflict, at least one, if not both, have overinflated egos. And so what I would suggest we do when we're in that situation is ask ourselves some assessment questions. Are we looking at the other party with consistent contempt and superiority? Are we convinced that our perspective is airtight and there's no room for any alternate point of view? And are we willing to blame the majority of the conflict on the other person's dullness or stubbornness? And if we answer yes to any of these questions, it's likely that our pride is also a significant part of the conflict. Pride makes us more demanding than serving, more accusing than forgiving, more defensive than approachable, and more kind of irritable than understanding and patient. That's according to Paul David Tripp. And we'll need to deal with our own ego in order to address the issues of conflict. So today, as you see conflict in your family, in your place of work, in your neighborhood, in your teams, in your dorm, wherever it is that you see conflict, stop and say, where is the pride? And if it's in you, repent and change, because this destroys harmony. And if it's the other person, be willing to try to address it. But if it's not addressable, understand that sometimes the only course of action is to say, if this pride doesn't go away, the insolence will continue without some kind of a change in the team. And what happens when we don't address pride is our hope is deferred. It's the bears, if you will, underneath the crawl space, or in the crawl space underneath the cabin, waiting for spring to come alive and be a real problem. And so deal with pride in you and in a team as soon as you see it rear its head.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.